up, Jenny?
Hey, brothers, how are you? Nothing. What are you doing?
I'm sitting here, and my cat is thinking about walking in front of the camera.
Oh,
So,
my
he's right
cat just threw
behind
up a
me
bunch of
now.
grass. Yeah, on the floor, for like literally seconds ago, like right before we started. I was like, "Yay!" And the best part is that she almost didn't make it to the carpet. So, yeah, she
Good
made it to
kitty.
the carpet to throw up on the carpet rather than on the linoleum in the
Yeah,
mudroom. So,
yeah.
God,
Good
she's good.
kitty.
Good
Very
kitty.
good kitty.
Yay!
Yay. Oh,
Well, she ate a bunch of
well.
grass. Yeah. Why do cats do that? Why do cats eat grass and then immediately vomit it up? Because they're just cleaning things out, or like, oh, this grass is so delicious, or I think this grass is going to taste like smoked salmon or something like that. I
I'm
don't
pretty
really
sure
get it.
this time it'll be better. I think they keep thinking, well, last time it tasted terrible, but I think this time it'll taste good.
Sometimes I wish I had the memory of a cat, like that sort of, hey, look at this. And then like 10 minutes later, it would be like, hey, look at this.
Exactly. This never stops being fun.
I
So,
know.
yeah.
I'd be okay with that. So. Well, cool. So we are back on a Wednesday. So here we are, and we saw each other last on Sunday. Is there anything
Mhm.
that really good that happened between Sunday and today that you'd like to discuss real quick before we get into our book talk?
No, I mean, no. um, mm, hmm, no.
No, me too. Me too.
Okay.
I did go ahead and price out brick for my raised bed. I'm just going to start out with one this year because,
Hmm.
again, best laid plans and all that thing we just talked. So we're just going to do one, see how it turns out, and go from there. And it's nice because at Menards, the bricks are only $1.11 a piece. That's nice. So,
Nice. Very
oh.
nice.
And they've got the big 16 by 8 by 8.
Mhm.
So that's going to be amazing. So I'm looking forward to that. Um,
Very good.
but other than that, yeah, kind of a quiet week. I had a blended learning task force meeting for school, which was, actually kind of fun. I like it. It's yeah, yep. That's okay. Well, and let's get to it then. We
I'm sure it
decided
was
to have our,
fabulous, Jenny.
yeah, fine, whatever. And anyway, it's book talk Wednesday. It's our first ever brother sisters book talk because like smart dumb fun is our mantra, and so we're gonna do smart stuff today by talking about books. And we're starting today, you guys, with fiction books. There are many types of books. We're just gonna start with some good fiction today. And Anne she picked one of her favorites, and I picked one of my favorites. And so, if you have any comments, if you want to, throw in some commentary about books that you like or things that we should be reading, then feel free to jump on in. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? All right, I'm going to go ahead and grab this. We're going to add that to the stream. And so, like I said, this is the very first ever Brother Sisters book talk. And the books that we are featuring today are Dietland by Sari Walker and Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. And, two really great, very different books.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read Dietland, and it's amazing. And Anna's read Station 11. And I don't know, did you like that book?
Also amazing. Oh, yeah, I love that book. In fact, I've given it as gifts.
Yeah, I just think and I'll talk about why I like it so much in a little bit. And I've read it numerous times, and we'll talk about why I've read it numerous times in a minute. But let's go ahead and start with you, Ann Brothers. Why don't you take us through your selection?
Well, I picked Dietland by Sari Walker, published in 2015. And when I first heard about this book, it was a critic on NPR was talking about this book, Dietland, and comparing it to a book called 13 Ways to Look at a Fat Girl. And they did a compare and contrast of it. And I've read both books. And I really liked the 13 Girls, or 13 Ways to Look at a Fat Girl. It was a really good book. But Dietland just, I'm not exaggerating. I've probably read this book 10 times since 2015. It's not a very long book. It's I want to say less than 300 pages. And you get sucked in so quickly, it's easy to finish it in a week. I mean, and that's not without even trying. So it's just such a good story. Mm-hmm. And then, like, every time I read it, I find something new, So anyway. It is
So,
about,
what it's
yes.
about?
Oh, it's about Plum Kettle, and Plum is her nickname. Her actual name is Alicia. So Plum Kettle, she is 300 pounds. Um, she is sad, mad, trying to be invisible, but of course, in our society, a 300-pound woman is never invisible. She's a ghostwriter for a girls' magazine called Daisy Chain. And basically, what she does is she pretends to be the editor of the magazine and answers girls' questions, and they are heartbreaking. I mean, she just day by day spends most of her time in a coffee shop answering these heartbreaking questions. Um, she works from home because the people at Daisy Chain, though it's never said out loud, really don't want her to work there because she doesn't meet their body image. But at the same time, they can say, oh, body image isn't important. Look, we have Plum working here. So it's kind of one of those catch-22 things. So she's tired of her life, tired of being a fat woman. And so at 29, just before her 30th birthday, she decides to get weight loss surgery. Before that can happen, though, she meets a young lady named, Lita. And Lita introduces her to a group of women, kind of a feminist cabal, if you will, in a place called Calliope House. And it's kind of her journey from there, figuring out who she is, how she turns her anger instead of inward, outward, learns how to be loved because she's not really sure how to do that, learns how to love. And then this whole story is set against another story about this vigilante group that's basically deemed by the media, it's called Jennifer. And Jennifer, this woman or group of women, is taking revenge on men in misogynistic industries. So this is going on at the same time that Plum's story is going on. And it's funny and it's a little dark because I do like something that's a little dark, but also very funny. And it's kind of this, the woman who wrote it, it was inspired by Fight Club, actually. She saw the movie Fight Club and she wanted to she thought, what is the feminist version of Fight Club? And this is what she came up with. And if you read this book, at the end of the book, it gives you a list of books that she read to help her, that helped inspire this book. And so I've read a number of the books that she suggested that helped inspire this story. And it's really, really fascinating. So, if you think, oh, it's a feminist fairy tale. And it kind of is, but what it made me do was it made me look at my own view of what I thought of my own body and what I thought of other people's bodies in order to make myself feel better about my body. And so in the last 4 years, it has really made me look at how society has shaped my view of what we think of overweight or fat people and how I thought of and how I think of myself. And so it really it made me change my perspective. So that's one of the reasons why I really love this book. And sometimes when I'm feeling down about myself, I go back to this book and I read it again.
Cool. Really cool.
So,
why did you love this book?
I loved this book because one, you get to go on Plum's journey with her as she learns to live and to love herself. And don't we all, aren't we all making that journey? So it's universal in that way. One of the reasons why I love this book is we don't need to smile. We don't need to act happy or act dumb or act sexy or be skinny or hate ourselves or take the blame or be polite and accommodating or worry about our appeal. We don't have to do any of that. We don't have to. But society has said we had to. I mean, I was certainly raised to be a bunch of those things.
Be so much prettier if you smile. Said, Anne, you'd be so much prettier if you just smiled.
Exactly. But I mean, we grew up like that. I think about all the times not just from like strangers, but from every place. And I was like, you know what? I don't have to be any of those things. If you're creeping me out, I don't have to be polite to you until you go away. It's a great message. I also love this book because it reminds me that we are not amusements. We're not here for your amusement. We're not here to be resented. We're not here for your validation. That my life has and how I live it has very little to do, if nothing at all, with what people think it should be. So I also love this book because it reminds you that when you're hungry, eat. You know, just do that. Surround yourself with what you love and who you love. That's the real important thing. And appreciate your body. It will let you know what it wants, but listen to it. And this is another thing. Whenever, a good question to ask yourself often, it asks, who makes money because I hate my body or because I hate myself? Who's making money off of that? And that's something that we have to look at all the time, especially as women. The industry makes a ton of money on us when we feel bad about ourselves, when we hate ourselves. Who's doing that? And why do we let them? And then finally, be feared. So that's
I can do that.
Love this book.
Yeah,
Me too.
I'm on my third reading of this book. I've read it I did my third reading of this book last year, and once you read this book, you start to realize how surrounded you are by the industry that is to basically make you feel bad about yourself so that you will build product up. And I'm not, and for some people that I'm not, this is not a judgment on what you do or if you buy into that. It's not, there's no judgment on that at all. It really is, but it really is interesting when you start to become aware of that and what that means for you. So like I was thinking of the character in this book, the actress who cuts her hair, and that, all hell breaks loose because
Marla.
Yes, Marla. She cuts her hair, and just all hell breaks loose after that because she just wanted a different look for herself, but because she had no control over, even her own image, how crappy that must feel. So, but no, it's and I also love it because they, as somebody that was once part of Weight Watchers, and in this book they call it Waist Watchers, which made me laugh out loud. I'm like, that's amazing, and it really is. It's that same. Of course, we don't call it Weight Watchers now. Now we call it WW. Just that sort of, again, who's making money on this? Right now it's Oprah, and that's, part of that. It's part of the machine, so to speak. So yeah, it's worth your time. Worth your time to read this book for sure. So Dietland. Yeah. And again, what I love about this book is that you have to really, again, I like books that make me think down the road, and that's where I come back to it. And that book is one of those books that makes me think and makes me come back to it. So yeah. So, well, sticking with and I'm not going to say this is necessarily a feminist theme, but it can lend itself to that. The book I chose was Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, and this book was published in 2014. This book, in terms of trying to explain what it's about, is hard to explain. There's a lot of story within the story of this book, but ultimately, this is a before and after story of a global pandemic. And the book kind of vacillates throughout, taking you to before the pandemic and the characters in it, and taking you to the characters after the pandemic. And so there's a lot to follow in terms of characters. If I were to break it up, it essentially follows two stories and the many webs of these two stories. The first is that a large portion of the book follows a young woman who is an actor in the post-pandemic world. She's part of a troupe known as the Traveling Symphony. She's an actor in this troupe that they are a traveling symphony, and they are also a group that produces Shakespearean plays in the post-pandemic world. And so we follow their story as they kind of essentially walk their way around the lower peninsula of Michigan and stop in different towns and perform their music in their plays. The second portion follows the story of an actor who dies the night the pandemic begins. In fact, the story actually starts with his death on stage. And then we follow a character who performs CPR on him, and then we learn of the pandemic through Jeevan's character. So we essentially follow these two story arcs: Kirsten in the post-pandemic world and Arthur in the pre-pandemic world. Arthur is the actor that dies. And we follow the stories of the people in their lives before and after the pandemic. So it's essentially told through the lens of these two characters. And what I love about this is that it's a fascinating look at the lives that we lead in this pre-pandemic world, which is essentially the world we're living in now, and in this post-pandemic world. The pandemic basically knocks out 99% of the population. So the technological world that we live in is over. So everybody is, there's no electricity, there's no computers, there's no cars, there's no airplanes, all of these things that we have grown so accustomed to, essentially in about a week-long period end, because this flu kills people within a couple days of them getting it. So like I said, it's a fascinating look at the lives we live and the things that we use to distract us in this world, and then in the world that is devoid of those distractions, and how we deal with that. So I've read this book several times, and I get something out of it each time, because you follow different stories of different characters. Of course, you have Arthur's character that you follow. You have Kirsten's character. You have Jeevan's character. You have Miranda's character. You have the character Arthur, not Arthur, but Arthur's friend Clark, who is probably one of my favorite characters in the story is Clark. And we follow his story about being trapped in an airport in Michigan. One minute he's traveling to Arthur's funeral, and the next minute he is now in an airport where he spends the rest of his life. And as far as why I love this book, is that it's beautifully written. It's poetically written. And Emily St. John Mandel is a fascinating writer in the sense that she takes her time in developing stories, character, ideas. And as a result of that, it makes you read slow and reflect on the things that she's saying. It's surprising, because sometimes I really like an action-packed book, and this book is action-packed in its own time, but I couldn't put it down. And there's a bunch of ideas, lines, expressions, experiences that I relate to throughout. And that's one of the reasons I like Clark's character so much, is that we're about the same age. Clark is 51 in the book, and he's been Arthur's friend, the actor who died, since they were 19. And so we get to learn about this expanse of years between 19 and 51. And I can relate to that, because I'm right at the end of that expanse where all of this stuff happens. And then here you are, on the crux of your later years. And it's like, what in the hell just happened? And at the same time that he's getting ready to experience this ennui of being your 50s, the world ends, and then it's a completely different narrative. And you're like, oh, now what? And all of these things that were important to him and that he was dealing with are over. And now he has this whole different experience to live. So there's so much cool thinking in that, just the section where we follow Clark in the airport and all of these things that are so normal to us. And the idea is that is it better to be born after this apocalypse, or is it better to be live after it and understand everything you've lost? It's just it's a deep story. I like this book because the majority of it takes place in Michigan, and I like, having spent time in many of the cities. There's some fictional cities that she makes up, but there's many cities that she talks about, and I've been through those cities, and I can picture them, that when they talk about Mackinac City, and they talk about Petoskey, and they talk about Traverse City, and I can see all those little places, and I'm imagining what these fictional cities are and what they look like. So yeah. Aunt Julie is with us. She said, I heard an interview on NPR with the author. Very interesting. This book is having a resurgence at this time. And I don't doubt that, because, because we're, Ann and I were talking beforehand that this pandemic is very slow moving, in the sense that all of these stories of pandemics and movies and zombie stuff, and it talks about, they're all very fast moving, all like explosion, and then the aftermath, where this pandemic is, it is a slow burn of a pandemic, and it's making us all crazy in other ways, where this story is like, it's over and it's done, and now we have to deal with the aftermath of that. And so that's one of the reasons I like this book so much, is that it's very much relevant to what we're living today, or could be living, as we continue this age of pandemics. And finally, one of the things I like about this story is the idea that the arts will endure. One of the lines in this book, and this is the mantra of the Traveling Symphony, And the reason that they do that is because survival is insufficient. And so to me, as the arts struggle right now in this pandemic time, that I think ultimately the arts of anything that we can carry with us, it's not going to be professional football, it's not going to be professional sports, it's going to be the arts in some way, shape, or form. Be it like the artwork of Miranda and her drawing of the Station 11 comic, or the Traveling Symphony, or those musicians, or Arthur's art as an actor. I just think that pops up again and again, is that ultimately the arts will endure, and that's the thing that sort of takes us from one side of the pandemic to the other. So, but that's one of the reasons I really like this book. What are your thoughts on Station 11, Anne?
Well, like you, it makes you do a lot of reflecting. One of the things I found interesting was that nobody lives in houses anymore, because that's where everybody died. Nobody had time to go to a hospital. They died in their homes. So nobody lives in homes anymore. Homes are cemeteries. People live in old Wendy's, and they live in the airport, and they live in
Walmart.
Places where, in the Walmart. Nobody lives in homes anymore, because that's where people died. And there's this debate, because Clark was my favorite character too. There's this debate because everybody at the airport was going someplace else. And so the debate then happens once they realize that nobody's coming to rescue them, that this is it. Then what do? Do you try to get home? Do you stay and make a life? And Jenny and I had this debate a couple years ago, after we had first read this book. And she's like, well, what would we do? And she's like, and I think we both in our hearts thought maybe we would try to make it home. But then Jenny and I got stuck in a flash flood once in Uvalde, Texas, and we were at a Ford dealership, and I really thought that we were going to be like rescued off the roof of this Ford dealership with a helicopter. I mean, it was like pretty hinky for a minute. Well, for a few hours. And so we were talking about, would we try to get home? Would we make a life where we were? And I said to Jenny, I said, well, what would we do if we were stuck at a Ford dealership in Uvalde, Texas? I'm like, I don't know. What would I do? Would I try to walk back to Michigan in the hopes that my husband made it, or that my parents made it? Or would I try to make a life for myself in Uvalde, Texas in a Ford dealership? Because in the end, that's what a lot of people end up doing that survive this, is that they end up making a life where they end up. And what's so interesting about the acting tour is that the tour group is that they actually move from place to place. And so not only are they actors, but they spread news. Well, what's going on in the world? Because all of a sudden, right now our world is global. We have the globe literally in the palm of our hands. And within, a month, the world is literally out your front door, and that's it. So not only do they bring the arts, but they bring the news from all over the state.
And when I think about the difficulties of what would be the most difficult, because ultimately it makes the most sense, especially, this story when like Clark gets stranded in the airport, it's November. So it's suicide to try and walk, even if just a couple hundred miles. If you don't have the clothing, if you don't have the knowledge of how to feed yourself, how are you going to sustain yourself for that amount of time? If you don't have any weapons, how do you know the intentions of other people? And they talk again and again about how difficult that first year was, because it was so violent and it was so terrifying, and everybody was just was still in shock from this massive collapse of society, that it almost doesn't make sense to go anywhere else. It almost just makes sense to just stay put. But again, that to me would be one of the most difficult things to overcome, is that you're global and now you're local in an instant. And I think that would be the most difficult thing for me personally to deal with. And I think a lot of people in this day and age, because you're so connected, that I think a lot of people would go through some serious withdrawals because you're no longer connected. Even the most disconnected people in this day and age are still really connected.
Yeah. So anyway, it's like Dietland, it leaves an impression. It leaves its impression, and you keep going back to it and back to it in your head. So you finally just go back to the written word. Also, it is really beautifully written. It reminded me of a McCormick McCarthy novel. Am I getting
Yes,
that author?
in that, yeah,
Cormac McCarthy.
yeah, and he writes in a really sparse style, and I would say she does as well.
Mm-hmm.
One of
But
my
it's
favorite
so
sections.
lovely.
Yes, one of my favorite sections of the book is the book where she gives you an incomplete list of all of the things that are now you'll no longer have in this new world. And that's my favorite. It's only a page and a half, and it's just sentence after sentence of these things that will no longer be. And it's just like, ooh, and it is a page and a half of some of the best writing in the whole book. And again, that whole idea that, yeah, it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, and again, like Dietland, it has a very female voice to it, even though you're dealing with a lot of male characters. Underlying, there is a real feminine voice to all of the story, how it's written, for sure. So, in my opinion,
and that's one of the things I really liked about Dietland is that it yes, it's a feminist novel. It is written in a way that there are male characters that are discussed, maybe even make a tiny appearance, but basically it's a novel about women. How, and the men in the novel are more abstract, which is, you hardly ever find that. You find lots of novels written by men for men where women are abstract. I mean, there's tons and tons of examples of that, but there's very few examples of where the men in the story are very abstract. And they actually did they tried to do a series of, I think on ANC, they actually did a season of Dietland. And I watched about 20 minutes of it before I turned it off in disgust, because they totally missed that in the creating of the series. They had to, instead of making men an abstract concept, or they had to introduce all these male characters that were not in the book. And I was very, very, very disappointed with that, because it was like, we can't, it's like somehow we can't tell a story about women without men, which I liked about this story, is that they told the story about women. And it didn't have to be about how we want men in our lives. It wasn't that they weren't, or that they were even, said bad, it was just like this it was an abstract. Men were an abstract in this novel. And that is highly, highly unusual. So I thought that was interesting. And people are like, well, that's kind of stupid. I'm like, really? Because we have men's novels like that all the freaking time. But, all of a sudden you do it with one female novel, all of a sudden, oh no, the world's falling apart. So I'm just saying, that was an interesting concept. It wasn't like, how am I going to get better for men? How am I going to get this man to be attracted to me? There wasn't any girl tries to get boy in this, which is unheard of. So, making myself better for the boy, So anyway.
Yeah, there's none of that. So,
yeah.
Well, cool.
So I thought that was an interesting. You hardly ever see that.
No. We covered a lot of ground today, Ann Brothers. We got a comment out there. It's from Tina. She says, preach it, Ann Brothers. Preach it. So
yeah, there you go.
Good. Well, okay. So 2 great books, you guys, in case you were wondering what books we covered this week. I'm going to go and put we covered Dietland. That was Ann's pick for our book talk. And oops, I forgot to do that. Wait, what just happened? There it is. So Ann chose Dietland by Sari Walker, and I chose Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Those are our book talk picks. 2 of our favorites that we have gone back to again and again. And I've listened to both. I've read both in text, and I have done an audiobook on both, and they both are really great audiobook productions. If you don't have time to sit and read and you want to be able to do some activities, do your gardening, plus listen to your book, these both come across audiobook really well. And I'm a huge proponent of the audiobook, because, man, any way you can get your reading done, get it done. Because reading makes you smarter. It makes you smarter. Reading a good one right now. I'm reading Alexander Hamilton's biography, the one that Lin-Manuel Miranda used to make the musical, or borrowed heavily from the musical, the one by Ronald Chernow. Very good. Yeah, heavy duty. It's a big one. It's big. So
Big book.
anyway, you have any questions? Andy, you got anything else you want to say about these books before we call it a day?
Not really. I think that what you need to do is read these books and then come back and we can all talk about it. So we can all
Agreed.
talk about these books because half the
Jill,
fun is like trying to. Yes.
oh, I know. I totally agree that half the fun is getting together and talking about it. Book club isn't just for drinking. I had to learn that. I had to learn that the hard way. So, and Julie, and Julie, this book is on my radar right now. It is on it is in my list of books to read. It's Emily St. John Mandel released another book just this year, The Glass Hotel. She just released that one a couple months back. So that is absolutely 100%.
It's on my Kindle list.
Nice. And Tina, yes, I have seen the Drunk History on Alexander Hamilton, and it is, if you've never watched Drunk History, you should, because it's fantastic. Fantastic. But yeah, the one on Alexander Hamilton is especially funny. So yes. All right, guys, we will be back tomorrow. Speaking of Drunk History, Anna and I will be back tomorrow. It is Bar Thursday. We will be drinking Michigan beer. I got to tell you, I had to work to get the Michigan beer that I didn't get the one I really wanted, but I got a pretty good second place. So the one I really wanted, well, because it's really hard to get Black Rock's beer in Wisconsin. There's a couple of places have it. They're all in either A, Hurley, which is right on the border, or B, in what's it, Ashland, which is 2.5 hours away. So I didn't. Yeah, I know, right? So anyway, and what movie are we reviewing tomorrow, Ann Brothers?
We are reviewing The Evil Dead.
Yes, the original, The Evil Dead. I watched it yesterday, and I got to tell you, wow.
That's one way to put it.
So yeah, join us tomorrow. What time? We are going to be on a little bit later tomorrow. We will be on at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern, because Ann has got to go visit with Aunt Julie tomorrow. So there you go. So yeah, we'll be joining you a little bit later tomorrow. We'll be reviewing Evil Dead, and not the remake. Somebody just did a remake of it. Ugh, whatever. The original 1981 version of The Evil Dead, and then drinking Michigan beer. So join us tomorrow. It should be fun. So there you go. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.